akartritvat, by freedom from proprietorship, nirgunatvat, from being unaffected by the qualities of material nature, jala, on water, arkavat, like the sun. Translation: the personality of Godhead, Kapilakhan, living entity is thus stated. How? What is the meaning of thus? That means it is previously described. How? With basically one-pointed or concentrated focus on Supreme Lord, essentially Bhakti Yoga. Even if one just fully tries to remember all the time, that is already Smaranam, one of the 9 limbs of devotional service. So Sravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, right? So like that. So by devotional service, thus means by engaging in devotional service, not by Hatha Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga or anything else. So when the living entity is thus unaffected by the modes of material nature, and there is another thing, right? In Bhagavad Gita itself, it has been mentioned. 14 chapter 26 verse, if we all remember. Mang cha yo avibhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samati teshan brahma bhojaya kalpate. So if someone is undeviatingly or unflinchingly, or unbroken, ahitika pratishta, right? So without, being a sahajya, right? If we follow the regulative principles of bhakti and continue to practice devotional service, essentially chanting minimum 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, following the regulative principles, hearing and reading, and spreading, Krishna's glory, right? So if we do it without a deviation and without being attached to anyone else, right? Then this Krishna says that one basically gets above the modes of material nature, right? One is freed from that material nature. So whichever, picture we pick up, essentially it all means that to be unaffected by the modes of material nature means to be fully engaged in basically one or all of the 9 limbs of devotional service. So I will just recap. When the living entity is thus unaffected by the modes of material nature, because he is unchanging and does not claim proprietorship, he remains apart from the reactions of the modes, although abiding in a material body, just as the sun remains aloof from its reflection on water. So the analogy, let's understand a bit more. So if we put any water pot or any water in any container, and we can see the sun's reflection in the water, and when we agitate the water, the reflection might look like moving along with the water, but the sun in its own position, it doesn't get disturbed because of this reflection. So similarly, the analogy is that even though, see, the soul is purely a spiritual entity, right? Even though the soul is abiding or residing, see here the word abiding. Abiding means basically when the soul is basically encaged or entrapped in the material body, we see the soul by its symptoms, by thinking, feeling, willing, consciousness, and all other things, right? That's all those things, right? The activities, right? It's based on the desire of the soul, right? And how it's conditioned so far, right? But essentially, soul is here. But the soul is, even though we say the conditioned soul, but actually the soul is not polluted as such. I mean, the element soul itself, that is not polluted. It is conditioned to think in a certain way, conditioned to act in certain way because of its previous karma and all those things. But the soul itself has not been polluted. It doesn't mix with something. Like to give an example, it's not like that water is polluted. What do we say? Water, when you mix some color in water, right? Then water actually gets changed, right? Or even better example, right? Milk is changed to curd, right? By reaction, right? So it's not the soul, gets transformed into something else because of this conditioning. No, the soul maintains its purity because of the influence of material modes of nature. It is, acting in a certain way. Desires arise in a certain, fashion. But soul element itself is not. It has not got corrupted. So we'll see. It remains in the body, but it is when it is unaffected by devotional service, then it says that he is unchanging. Unchanging here, it refers to, let's go back, avikarat here, right? This part. Avikarat means vikar means change. Avikarat means from without change. And that's the soul's quality when it is, above the mode of nature by engaging in devotional service. That means it has regained its glory. Yeah. So there are several sections in Bhagavatam which actually says that as soon as the soul is basically fully engaged in devotional service, that stage is called unchanged state. We will see further. Yeah, I spent too much time in translation only. Let's say purport. In the previous chapter, Lord Kapiladeva has concluded that simply by beginning the discharge of devotional service, one can attain detachment and transcendental knowledge for understanding the science of God. Again, it's the knowledge and the detachment. These are the products of devotional service, not that these are needed for devotional service. Yeah, means if someone starts chanting, sincerely chanting, then and hears Krishna Katha from realized souls, yeah, like Srila Prabhupada and so many of his loyal or we say fully qualified and bona fide followers, disciples. If one hears from pure devotees, then Krishna cleanses the heart, and basically then knowledge and detachment automatically develops as a byproduct of devotional service. Not that unless we develop knowledge, we cannot do devotional service. No. From devotional service, these things arise. Here, the same principle is confirmed. A person who is detached from the modes of material nature remains just like the sun reflected on water. When the sun is reflected on water, the movement of water or the coolness or unsteadiness of the water cannot affect the sun. Similarly, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha. Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, 7th verse, right? Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Asu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Jad Ahitukam. When one engages fully in the activities of devotional service, these words are very, very, these are the qualifying words, Yeah. When one engages fully in the activities of devotional service, Bhakti Yoga, like devotional service Bhakti Yoga, he becomes just like the sun reflected on water. Means sun stays in its orbit, it is not affected by the movement of water, any other objects of reflection. So soul remains in its own glory. What is its natural constitutional position? Jivara Swarup Krishna Nityada, right? So if we are fully engaged in devotional service, that's the original constitutional position. Then it is not affected by the modes of nature or the matter and anything material. Yeah. Although a devotee appears to be in this material world, actually he is in the transcendental world. As the reflection of the sun appears to be on the water, but is many million of miles away from the water, so one engaged in the Bhakti Yoga process is nirguna or unaffected by the qualities of material nature. So actually, most of the times when Srila Prabhupada mentions, a devotee, right, that means a pure devotee, most of the time, unless Srila Prabhupada clarifies, the progressive devotee. But implicitly, Srila Prabhupada means full Krishna consciousness, or full Bhakti Yoga, like full time, yeah, like he is always conscious of Krishna at least. Avikara means without change. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that each and every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And thus his eternal position is to cooperate or to dovetail his energy with the Supreme Lord. This is his unchanging position. It's mentioned in second canto, 9th chapter only. The second verse, 2.9.1 and 2, right? These two are very, very defining verses. Yeah, it mentions basically why, how come the soul, which is being para prakriti nature, how come it gets captivated by apara shakti, which is material energy, bahiranga shakti, external energy of the Lord, right? So it's mentioned that it happens by the will of Krishna because the living entity rebelled, right? So original constitutional position was to serve the Lord and in cooperation with the Lord in one of the spiritual planets. But when the living entity develops the desire for whatever reason, yeah, to enjoy separately from Krishna, and then by, just to rectify this mentality, by the will of Krishna, the external energy is able to, captivate or capture the soul. Yeah. That's mentioned there. Rasmaya Radha Ranjan, like that. Parasyanubhavasana. And the next sloka 292 actually, that actually mentions Yarhi Vav Mahimnestve, Parasmin Stalmaya, and Ramet Gat Samoha, like that. It's basically mentioned that as soon as the soul is situated back in its glorious position, which is basically free from mode of nature and 100% voluntarily, lovingly willing to serve Lord. So that's the original constitutional and glorious situation of the soul. Yeah, this is his unchanging position. So that is what I was referring to. As soon as he employs his energy and activities for sense gratification, this change of position, change of position is called vikara. Change of position from glorious, servant, or one of the in one of the mellows, one is serving Krishna in or Vishnu Tattva in a spiritual planet. From there to coming to the material world and getting affected by modes of nature, being conditioned, thinking I am a king or I am this or that, right? So that's called vikara, this position. Similarly, even in this material body, when he practices devotional service under the direction of this spiritual master, he comes to the position which is without change, because that is his natural duty. Yeah. So multiple points are mentioned here, that even though, we are in this material body, but we have to practice devotional service using the senses which we have acquired, right? So we are not like Naradji, who has transcendental sense, but we can still, Krishna gives the facility that we can still perform devotional service using our current available senses, right? So whatever tongue we have got, for example, I'm not able to sing, right, so nicely, but I still, if given the opportunity, I have to do my best with the available senses, right, and the knowledge, the amount of knowledge I have, bhakti knowledge, right? So we cannot say that, unless we are perfect like Naradji, or, we are perfect like Srila Prabhupada, till the time we cannot speak on Bhagavatam. So there is one, interesting point came to my mind. Prahlad Maharaj, when he starts glorifying Nrsimhadev, so of course he is, Bhakta Shiromani, but he begins by, the second or third verse of his glorification, that he says that Tasmadaham Vigata Viklav Istorasya Sarvatmana Mahigranami Yatha Manisam. Even though he says that he is born into low family, all these things, but he says that like he will give up all such considerations of inferiority or anything, and in full surrender, and as far as his intelligence allows, he will still glorify the Lord. So that's the mode of preaching, right? We don't need to be perfect to begin the preaching, but means we should always be, hearing and chanting more and more. Anyway, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, liberation means reinstatement in one's original position. The original position is one of rendering service to the Lord, bhakti yogena or bhaktya. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada is referring to second canto, 10th chapter, 6th verse, right? Nirodho asya anusayanam atmanah saktivhi muktir hitva anyatha rupam swarupena vyavasthiti, right? So mukti means hitva anyatha rupam. So many forms, there are 8.4 million species, or even within human being, basically, there are so many designations, this or that, right? Giving up all such artificial, either gross body or the subtle consciousness, when we are fully basically engaged in service to Lord Krishna, that means that's the mukti. Mukti doesn't mean as the common fuzzy understanding in market is there, soul goes somewhere in the void. That's it, something like that. Either. Yeah, that's the Nirvisheshan Sunyavadi. Srila Prabhupada nullified that, right? The soul, it has its own spiritual form. Anyway, let's proceed further. When one becomes detached from material attraction and engages fully in devotional service, that is changelessness. Again, even in the material body, if someone is fully engaged in devotional service, that is already, he has achieved the avikara form, right? Now, next point which was mentioned in the sloka was akartritvat, means not doing anything for sense gratification. When one does something at his own risk, there is a sense of proprietorship. and therefore a reaction. But when one does everything for Krishna, there is no proprietorship over the activity. By changelessness and not by claiming the proprietorship of activities, one can immediately situate himself in the transcendental position in which one is not touched by the modes of material nature, just as the reflection of the sun is unaffected by the water. So just one thing I want to little bit add here. Yeah. So this proprietorship, yeah, again, this is these things, right? This happen under the influence of false ego. The first effect, this of false ego, one of the first effects is that we consider ourselves as body, and the products of bodily activities, we consider that ours, right? So mama hamiti, right? Mannete, right? So that's famous, right? Aham and mameti, right? So it's where that's what is referred here. ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान सहगन ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च नमः ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिन् इति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते। सप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Every verse of Srimad Bhagavatam is very special and full in itself and competent, capable in itself to, give us the full understanding of Krishna. Very interesting theme is presented in this sloka, this unchanging, right? And yesterday I was going through lecture by His Holiness Bhaktivinoda Swami Maharaj on this same sloka. So it's fortunate for me that I got ready-made material, but what a clarification! ISKCON Sannyasis, especially, such maturity they have in bhakti. Anyway, so many points he actually brought forth in the lecture. I would like to share some of them. Yathamati yathasruti, right? So one of the things he mentions is, sometimes, when we are when the soul is not free. It is mentioned, this sloka is mentioned when it is free, but just to see the contrast, when the soul is not free, really, from the mode of nature, and then the soul really thinks that he has been the soul is anyway feminine, the soul independent, right? Thinks that they are independent. So many people in this world, they will say if they are in very high material position, right? Some chief minister or even MLAs, right? Or chief minister or head of the state, right? They think that who is above them? There is no one above them, right? For example, someone used to ask Srila Prabhupada that, I think they are who is the above, the president of the United States? There is no one. It's the most powerful country, and the president of US is the most powerful person in the world, materially. And who is above him? Srila Prabhupada said he serves his senses. It's not that he's independent. No one is independent unless, one is fully situated in God consciousness or Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Unless the soul is in its constitutional glorious position, it is always serving Maya. Either the soul has to serve basically Krishna, or the soul has to serve Maya. Okay. So it is the biggest illusion when someone thinks that he or she is independent in this world. There is no one to control him. Prahlad Maharaj says that te api isatantryam urudam nibaddha, right? We are under the strict control of the strong ropes of material nature. Yeah, that's the most famous verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, which Srila Prabhupada all the time quoted most frequently. Nate viduh partha gatim hi vishnum durasaya ye bhairarth manna andha yathandhar upniyamana te api isatantryam. The system of Lord is Krishna, right? Te api isatantryam urudam nibaddha. So we are not typically, unless one is fully engaged in devotional service under the guidance of bona fide spiritual master, till the time one is always, controlled by modes of material nature. Okay. So the independence is not there. And another thing is, which comes forth, is that soul has the natural tendency of the soul is to serve and to love and be loved, right? So that's the serving tendency when we talk, right? So it has to serve, whether it's Maya, or under the influence of Maya, something else, and otherwise, basically, if the soul is free from effects of mode of nature, then it will serve Krishna. Or it's basically the other way around, that when one actually develops the willingness and develops the, inclination, positive inclination to serve Krishna, naturally it gets to be freed from the effects of Maya. And second aspect, which is coming in this verse, is this, avikarad and akartritvan. So on avikarad, there is a famous, related to this theme, famous verse composed by Rupa Goswami, is that Iha yasya harera dasya karmana manasa gira nikhilasu avasthasu jivan mukta sauchyate. So here also Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in the purport, even in abiding, is the word? Yeah, somewhere it was there, yeah. Although abiding, yeah. So the sloka says that Iha yasya harera dasya. Even in this material body or material world, it appears that pure devotee is in this body, material body. It looks like they are in material body, but they are actually, non-existent. They are not existing on this material plane. Yeah, So if someone is fully engaging his or her, by speech, karmana, by activities, manasa by mind, and then gira by speech, right? So by chanting or glorifying Krishna, right? So glorifying means sharing Krishna Katha or knowledge with others. So if one is engaging all such senses in service of Krishna, then basically Jivan Mukta Sauchyate, Nikhilas Avasthasu Jivan Mukta Sauchyate. So even though abiding in this material body, one is basically already liberated, even though situated within this material body. Yeah. So there were multiple examples which Maharaj has shared, and I would like to say the reason I always share beforehand from whom I got the knowledge, because I'm not born with this transcendental knowledge, and I upfront want to acknowledge from whom Srila Prabhupada and his great followers, from them only I received basically I have received some knowledge, and I could share some bit, right? So I will go little more in this. Basically, I don't like the idea, pretending that I am some great transcendentalist on my own. I'm not a great transcendentalist, and definitely not on my own. Okay. So Einstein used to say, the secret of innovation is hiding the source of information. And that's a very, very effective statement which I came across long back. So following in that line, I always would like to share from where I got the some inspirations, right? So yeah. So this example of this, even though abiding in this material body, but one is still liberated, yeah, of vikara status, right? So there are several examples, but before that, something else came to my mind. Like Prahlad Maharaj, to his schoolmates, to his Gurukula mates, right, other students. So when he is sharing the transcendental knowledge about the soul, and he's basically imploring them to engage into with basically bhakti yoga, and he's saying that bhakti yoga is not difficult at all. Paramatma is the Suhrit. He is closest, basically associate of the soul, of friend of the soul, because he is residing in the heart, region of the heart, and he's closest to the soul, and it's not difficult to serve him. So Prahlad Maharaj says it's not difficult at all to serve Vasudeva. Yeah? And he basically shares some of the knowledge of the analytical knowledge of the soul also. So there he mentions, Atma Priya. He says that if Eka Priya, like that, there are 12 qualities of the soul. He mentions. Okay, I think 7.7. 19 and 22 slokas are there. So there also he says, Avikar word comes, like soul is unchanged. So I'm just I wanted to refer to that. Soul, he says, let's actually, open that. And if we can quickly refer that, that will be a nice, sort of recap. Yeah. Atma Nityo Avyaya Shuddha. Atma is just like the Atma, and then Nityo Avyaya Shuddha Eka Kshetra Ki Asraya Avikriya. This is what I was referring. And this Avikriya, he again mentions, not undergoing changes like the body. Like the 6 pages, right? We have come across the 6 pages, right? Taking birth and to basically finally dwindling and finishing, right? Transformation, producing something, all these things, right? So wherever we go, actually, this avikar is mentioned several places. Yeah, coming back here. Yeah, so few of the examples of Jivan Mukta Uchyate, right? For example, topmost is like Haridas Thakur, and here our most famous is Haridas Thakur, recent times, and of course Srila Prabhupada also. Yeah, Haridas Thakur was, even though he was looked like that he is in material body, but he was just completely different transcendental plane. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to daily visit him with Jagannath Prasad, and they used to have conversation, right? And before all this, basically, many of the pastimes manifested in here Jagannath Puri. Before that, I think he was, tested, not tested to, verify, but Krishna arranged such pastimes that his glory was, established even more firmly, and it became well known, right? So one envious person sent prostitute, very beautiful prostitute, to tarnish his glory. But that prostitute, when she approached, then Haridas Thakur, he just basically requested her that let me complete my japa, and then I will satisfy you. What is the satisfaction of the soul actually? Soul satisfaction of the soul is that to regain its constitutional position, right? And then the soul is actually in its Sachidananda form, right? Sachidananda situation, right? Right now in this miserable material body, I don't feel Sachidananda all the time. Only when I hear from some pure devotee, or some Bhagavad Katha, Krishna Katha, or when the some nice, very clean-hearted devotee, when they perform nice kirtan, right? So kirtan and Krishna Katha, these are the two moments. These are the two situations when it is done offenselessly and by advanced devotees. In those moments, we feel ecstasy, the ecstasy or bliss of bhakti, right? Otherwise, rest of the times I don't feel Sachidananda, right? So in this miserable material body. So basically, the point is the soul's happiness is to regain its glorious position of Krishna Nityada. So Haridas Thakur was talking, referring at that level. So Haridas Thakur eventually, by the third night, she became pure devotee, and she herself got initiated. Essentially, not that Haridas Thakur conducted a formal initiation ceremony, and she basically started chanting nearby and next to Tulsi plant, right? So the point is, Haridas Thakur was, even though it looked like that he is in a material body, he has a material body, but he was already Jivan Mukta. That is one. I'm just getting short because there are many examples to share, because Haridas Thakur's glory is Namacharya, right? So he's Brahmaji himself, and Brahmaji is a pure devotee, and they were talking completely at transcendental level. And another level is Rai Ramananda or Ramananda Rai, right? Ramananda Rai is like again the closest associates, one of the closest associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Ramananda Rai was so exalted that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when first they had discussion, yeah, at the bank of Gopali, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had invited him, come to the place of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that is in Jagannath Puri, and then so he, wound up his government duty and basically shifted to Jagannath Puri eventually. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to have very nice pure bhakti conversation with Ramananda Rai, right? So Ramananda Rai was extraordinary, not even just someone who is just progressive sadhana, no, not like that, definitely. So one time, Pradyumna Mishra, if I remember correctly, he basically met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and requested Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to share some of the details or the essence of, some essence from Srimad Bhagavatam, so that, he can overcome this encumbrances of family life and material attachment and all sorts of things, and become basically a pure devotee or become very good devotee. Then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended Pradyumna Mishra to go to Ramananda Rai and learn from him. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that I don't know anything about Bhagavatam like that. Of course, he is Krishna himself, but Krishna wants us to learn Bhagavatam from his pure devotee, right? So person Bhagavatam, essentially, right? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed him to go to Ramananda Rai. So Pradyumna Mishra went to Ramananda Rai's home, and it was a big home, whatever. So the servants told him to wait for some time at the reception, wherever, and saying that Ramananda Rai is busy in some services. So after some time, he found out from the servants himself what was the service, that Ramananda Rai was massaging the girl dancers who would enact Jagannath Natak, scenes, from this book is famous, Jagannath Natak, okay, or maybe that's the title, I think. So he was preparing the girls. There are further details which I don't want to get into right now, because elevated devotees could talk about it. But he was personally, preparing the girls, right? And when Pradyumna Mishra heard from the servants about this, he became a little confused. He wanted to verify whether he has reached the correct address or not. Is it the house of Ramananda Rai? Okay, yes, servant said yes. So, is he the same person who is devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Yes, servant replied. Then, he became confused and came back to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he shared his awkwardness, that how come a pure devotee be intimately, associated or serving or preparing the beautiful dancer girls, Then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu smiled and he said, no, you don't know Ramananda Rai. He is not at this physical level. Why? Because he is fully absorbed in Krishna and how to serve Krishna best, perfectly. Everything has to be perfect. Details. Srila Prabhupada used to say, care lies in details, right? So Ramananda Rai used to even, teach how to make, the gestures during the dance. When, these dances are essentially through the postures and the mudras, right? Different, essentially the dialogues are kind of conveyed, right? So Ramananda Rai used to personally used to show them, perfectly how to, have, basically different postures, right? Gestures, right? So then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained that Rai Ramananda is fully absorbed in Krishna, is absorbed in service of Krishna, and how it should be done, he personally teaches. So Rai Ramananda, even though it looked like he has a physical body, but he was completely a transcendental Golok, Golok Prem, that sort of level, basically. That he is not thinking that, beautiful dancer girls' bodies are for enjoyment by, any male or any person in this world, right? They are Krishna's, servants, and we should not have the tendency to enjoy them. I remember my, Bhakti Ucha teacher long ago, when I was visiting Srirangam, not Srirangam, here, I think in Melupati somewhere. Yeah. So local, Matajis, they used to come, very devoted Matajis. They used to sing very nicely, eloquently, without any supporting musical instruments. So that time itself, His Grace Kripamay Gaurang Prabhu, I learned so many instructive things from him. So he told, cautioned me immediately, individually. These are not for when Matajis, some Matajis come to temple, local Mataji, right? So they are singing for the pleasure of the Lord. We should hear maybe with devotion, but they are not for our mental enjoyment. There is a very fine balance, thin line. And some Matajis they sing, right? So it becomes, it sounds very interesting. Sometimes we even think that, it's the basically highly devotional. It is devotional from their mind. Within their heart, it is maybe very high, devotional thing, devotional activity. But we should not have the tendency to enjoy for ourselves. So there is a thin line. We have to be, careful about it. That are we relishing the bhakti, or are we just taking it as a soothing mental enjoyment, right? So it's not that we are completely forbidden from hearing from, some Mataji singing, but yeah, there are some details which La Prabhupada has mentioned about it. Maybe we all could find out from some, more learned devotee. Anyway, so coming back to example of Rai Ramananda, so he was very elevated personality. One more example. So these two examples, Haridas Thakur and Ramananda Rai, they are Jivan Mukta Suchete. Of course, they were not sadhaka devotees, right? They are like special personalities from Krishna Lila who appeared in Chaitanya Lila, right? If we go little back, or even the speaker of Bhagavatam, who is Sukadeva Goswami, so Sukadeva Goswami was special, right? So when we all know, right, when he was passing through one lake or place where many beautiful girls they were taking bath. So when Sukadeva Goswami is passing by, so he's such an aloof, he was so much aloof from, bodily designation, or non-interested at all in, enjoying matter, that it reflects basically. So the beautiful girls, they didn't think it is necessary to cover them, somehow or other. But when Vyasadeva, because he was still, Grihastha in Grihastha, so they have to make a discrimination or whatever duality, right? So that time the ladies or girls, they covered themselves. So Vyasadeva was surprised. Anyway, we all know the story that, Sukadeva Goswami is one such personality. But that is very far off, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastime is relatively near, just 537 years ago. So Haridas Thakur and basically Rai Ramananda, they two are very correlatable. And Srila Prabhupada himself, there is one very distinct moment. What happened during one stage program? Srila Prabhupada talked, the program means basically it should be centered around Krishna Katha. Yeah, not only singing and dancing. Of course, that is there, but offenseless kirtan and singing and ecstatically dancing, that's there. That would be there. But the program core, any program core part was used to happen was Krishna Katha, some discussion on Krishna's pastime, philosophy, or something, or mixture of both, right? So yeah, after the Srila Prabhupada's basically class, and then kirtan and other things started. So towards the end, everybody ran towards the stage, and they were all wanted to touch Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet. They were all trying to touch. Okay. And then, Srila Prabhupada said to one of his disciples who was just nearby, I don't know his name, but Srila Prabhupada mentioned, why they are all wanting to touch my feet? The reason is I don't have a trace of, any desire to enjoy any woman. Srila Prabhupada said. Another time, Srila Prabhupada had mentioned that, I think it happened during a question answer session or somewhere. I don't know exactly. Srila Prabhupada said the difference between you and me is that even in a room full of naked girls, I will not get agitated. Yeah. So these kind of things. So Srila Prabhupada was basically, a pure devotee person, in person, a very, very pure devotee, and he has set the standard, right? So now the question is, it looks or it sounds far-fetched to bigger percentage, I would say majority, or maybe too many, right? But there is always a hope. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's whole mission was that if we perform devotional service, nicely, carefully. Nicely means, as instructed by spiritual master, and, under his direction, do's and don'ts. If we follow, then Srila Prabhupada has clearly mentioned. I don't have the ready reference, but I remember clearly from the book of Srila Prabhupada. He mentions that from bhakti, from sadhana bhakti, prema bhakti can be developed. Yeah. So that's the hope. Yeah. From sadhana bhakti, prema bhakti can be developed. So we cannot, we don't need to lose hope, that Gaudiyas, the traditional lineage, they are talking about some, very, very sweet things. Not like that. Bhagavatam itself is sweet, yeah. Since entire, I find even, entire, even second canto, some devotees say that it is very dry, fluffy. No, no, no. There are so many sweet, sweet things in entire Bhagavatam, whether it's first canto or 12th canto. Yeah. So I'm just saying that we have so many basically topics in from Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, even Bhagavad Gita. There are so many topics, so many things which Srila Prabhupada has so nicely basically explained. Yeah. So we have to just carefully go through the process of sadhana bhakti, and that will culminate. If we follow it properly, then Gyan and Vairagya automatically develops. If it does not develop, that means we are not doing it nicely. We have to introspect, and we have to seek guidance that what are we missing? As simple as that, right? And we should have the faith that Srila Prabhupada's books are sufficient for our full Krishna Bhakti. Yeah, books are the basis essentially. Unless we read, you see, if we have a problem in reading, then we can hear. I mean, I'm referring to those who have this reading problem, not to those who are lazy. So some senior persons might have difficulty in reading, so they could hear, right, as much as possible. Or even some of the family members could recite, right? Or there are even Hindi version and other version, some full narration is also available. So books are the basis. Unless we go through these books, which are very relatable. It's not something dry, abstract. No, even the second canto, even when Paramatma description, I'm just sharing one bit here just to prove this. Yeah, but second canto is not dry. Who says it's dry? It's extremely relatable. Paramatma description comes second canto, second chapter, 8, 9, 10, 11, and the 12th verse. Amazing verse, right? After even the Paramatma description is extremely sweet. I don't need to recite all those 4 verses, but the 5th verse is extremely special. It says, Adin Leela Hasite Chanolasad, Bhrubhanga Samsuchit Bhuri Anugraham, Icheta Chintamayam Enamisram, Yavan Vano Dharanaya Vatishte. Point is, Bhrubhanga Samsuchit Bhuri Anugraham. The signal of the eyebrows of the Krishna, of course. It's a special benediction on devotees, right? So second canto mentions moving eyebrows of signals of the eyebrows of Krishna, right? I'm just saying. So point is, it's not something mundane or sorry, it's mundane. Of course, Bhagavatam is not mundane, but it's not something dry and abstract. It's extremely relatable if we carefully read. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, right, among the five prime, among 64 limbs or more, the 5 are the 5 chosen. One was there were Mathura Nivas, Sadhu, like Seva and all those things, right? But the one is Bhagavatat Rasaswadan. Yeah. So Bhagavat Arth Rasaswadan. That means that carefully checking or reading the even synonyms. Yeah. Synonyms, one word meaning of Bhagavatam. And those are extremely, extremely special. Yeah. So just to and I did not cover the contrast example of Iha Yasya Haridasi, So Vishwamitra is covered and Saubhari Muni is covered. That they were engaged into Ashtanga Yoga or some yogic process, but they were not into devotional service, right? Proper devotional service to Vishnu or Krishna. So they were basically they were not successful. The process was not complete, and they didn't reach perfection. Saubhari Rishi, he got agitated after cursing, Garuda Dev. And Garuda Dev is such a great Vaishnava that he took the curse on, he accepted the curse. Not that he was not powerful enough to nullify. He could have nullified, like King Parikshit. He could have nullified the curse of the Brahmana, right? And even Chitraketu, he could have nullified or he could have counter-cursed the curse of Parvati, right? but such great Vaishnavas who are mentioned in Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj, Chitraketu Maharaj, they, and even Indradyumna Maharaj, who had accepted the curse of Agastya Muni and became Gajendra, right? Anyway, so the Saubhari Muni and Vishwamitra Muni, they are given as counter example. Like they were not into devotional service, they were some meditating Ashtanga process, yogi or something else, right? And they were not perfect, they didn't reach perfection, right? Both of them got deviated, right? Vishwamitra Muni begot Sakuntala from Menka, right? And here Saubhari Muni married not one but 50 princesses of King Mandata, right? The point is, the only process is direct service to Krishna, not meditation on Virat Rupa, not meditation on Paramatma. Srila Prabhupada knows what has to be done in this Kali Yuga, and Srila Prabhupada mentions in the introduction of Bhagavad Gita itself that I have carried out the will of Krishna. The scripture, how the Bhakti Yoga has to be presented for this age, and Srila Prabhupada, we all know, he is Ganapati Bhakta of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, he has shown us the way through his pure devotee messenger, Srila Prabhupada. And if we follow him nicely, nicely means chanting our sincere rounds, minimum 16 rounds, and hearing and reading Krishna Katha and following four regulative principles, it would culminate into Prema Bhakti, provided we follow the process nicely. So there is much more to talk, but as I started saying that we are under the strict control of time. So time is up. If there is any question, we can discuss. Hare Krishna. It looks like we don't have any questions. And in that case, we could stop here. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।